Welcome everyone to another episode of Archetype Review. In this episode we are going to be exploring the Harpie Archetype. So the Harpie Archetype is technically one of the oldest archetypes ever, simply because its very first monsters and cards came out around the time of Metal Raiders, which was one of the earliest parts of Yugioh. Visually, Harpies are all pretty much centered around being these ladies who are also winged beast creatures. Kind of a combination of beauty but also implementing fear monster traits, which is very interesting. Throughout history, Harpies have had their fair share of really bad monsters and support cards, but they've also had some that actually initiate some really interesting combos. To this day, they're definitely not anywhere in their top tier, because they do need more support. But overall, as an archetype, they're not necessarily bad because they do have some pretty effective cards. In terms of common themes that the cards have, a lot of the monsters have the attack stat at 1300 and defense at 1400, and they also have certain similar themes around certain cards, such as the hysteric cards, the feather cards, and even their rival Griffin cards. Alright, so let's go ahead and dive right in. So we're going to begin with some of the earliest cards in this archetype that all came out during Metal Raiders, being Harpie Lady, Elegant Egotist, and Harpie Lady's Sisters. The original Harpie Lady is a wind level 4 winged beast monster with 1300 attack and 1400 defense, and it is a normal monster that says this human shaped animal with wings is beautiful to watch but deadly in battle. The next card is Elegant Egotist, a normal spell card that says if Harpie Lady is on the field, special summon one Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady's Sisters from your hand or deck. And the third one is Harpie Lady's Sisters. It's a wind level 6 winged beast with 1950 attack and 2100 defense. And the effect says cannot be normal summon or set, must first be special summon with Elegant Egotist. It's very clear that by this point the original Harpie Lady as well as Harpie Lady's Sisters are just not good cards at all. Strangely enough, Elegant Egotist is a card that has not aged horribly, as it does actually special summon Harpie Lady monsters from the deck and essentially duplicate and swarm, and any card that lets you special summon from the deck is naturally a very powerful card. As a fun fact that a lot of people don't know with Harpie Lady's Sisters is its stat line. Looking at the artwork, you can clearly tell that there are 3 Harpie Ladies in that card. So if you actually take the base stat line of a normal Harpie Lady, 1300 and 1400, and multiply that by 3, because there's 3 of them, you will get 3900 attack and 4200 defense. Then if you divide that by 2, you are at 1950 attack and 2100 defense. So that's just a little random thing in there that a lot of people don't actually know, but I do find it very intriguing that they chose to do that. A few years down the road, Harpie Lady actually got some power crab versions of itself, being Harpie Lady 1, Harpie Lady 2, and Harpie Lady 3. All 3 are wind level 4 winged beast monsters with 1300 attack and 1400 defense, and the first one says, this card's name is always treated as Harpie Lady. All wind monsters gain 300 attack. Harpie Lady 2 says this card's name is always treated as Harpie Lady. Negate the effects of flip effect monsters this card destroys by battle. And Harpie Lady 3 says, this card's name is always treated as Harpie Lady's Sisters, Harpie Lady. An opponent's monster that battles this card cannot declare an attack during your opponent's next 2 turns. From these 3, Harpie Lady 1 is by far the best of the 3, as number 2 doesn't really have an effect that aged very well, as flip effect monsters were problematic back when it came out during Rise of Destiny, but eventually within a few years, that effect was really mediocre. Harpie Lady 3 on the other hand, I mean, at least it's an effect, but it's definitely not a good effect in terms of stopping your opponent, as destruction is always much better than simply targeting a monster and not making it attack for 2 turns. Harpie Lady 1 actually offers some pretty sizable attack bonuses, as plus 300 attack for all wind monsters does actually generate a good advantage, especially if you have multiple copies of this card on the field. It also does not exclude itself, which means on the field, as long as its effect is not negated, it comes naturally to the field with 1600 attack. Very clearly though, you can tell that the original Harpie Lady by this point was already power crept. Now we're going to talk about a few more really bad Harpie cards, being Harpie Girl, Cyber Harpie Lady, and Birdface. So Harpie Girl is a wind level 2 winged beast normal monster with 500 attack and defense, and it says a Harpie chick who aspires to flit about beautifully and gorgeously, but attack sharply. Cyber Harpie Lady is an effect monster with 1800 attack and 1300 defense, and it says this card's name is always treated as Harpie Lady. And then lastly, Birdface is another level 4 winged beast monster with 1600 attack and defense, and it says when this card is sent to the graveyard as a result of battle, you can add 1 Harpie Lady from your deck to your hand, then shuffle your deck. Harpie Girl is by far the worst Harpie monster in the entire history of Yu-Gi-Oh! Simply because it's even worse than the original Harpie Lady, as really the only reason why you would ever want to run this in a deck, not that you would, is because it has Harpie in the name. There are a lot of cards that actually support Harpie, thus being the archetype, which yeah, it does support this card, but there's just much better alternatives out there, including the original Harpie Lady. Cyber Harpie Lady, on the other hand, is definitely a lot better, but it's not great. Essentially, it's an 1800 beatstick, as even though it's an effect monster, really the only effect it has is the fact that it's treated as Harpie Lady. And then Bird Phase, well, Bird Phase is what you get when Konami thinks that basically making an archetype specific mass dragon is too powerful, as this card does not float into a Harpie Lady, but instead all it lets you do is add it from your deck to your hand, which is significantly underpowered compared to special summoning into a Harpie Lady. The effect will only trigger as a result of battle, which is already a huge limitation, especially in the year 2020, and on top of that, once again, it's not floating onto the field to special summoning, so yeah, it's really lackluster. As a quick additional note, one thing that you will see that's very common with this archetype is the fact that certain Harpie cards actually say that this card's name is always treated as Harpie Lady, but other feature cards will actually indicate that they're only treated as Harpie Lady when they're either on the field or in the graveyard or both. As a quick reminder, the rule of 3 only applies to the deck and extra deck combined, meaning cards like the original Harpie Lady 1, 2, 3, and Cyber Harpie Lady are all treated as Harpie Lady, which means that from these 5 cards you can only have a total of 3 total copies. So you cannot have 3 Harpie Lady 1s and 3 Cyber Harpie Ladies. That's just not how it works. Let's move on to 3 much better Harpie cards, being Harpie Queen, Harpie Chandler, and Harpie Dancer. Harpie Queen has 1900 attack and 1200 defense, and the effect says that this card's name becomes Harpie Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. You can discard this card to the graveyard, add 1 Harpie Hunting Ground from your deck to your hand. Harpie Chandler has 1400 attack and 1300 defense, basically the reverse stat line of a typical Harpie Lady, and the effect says you can discard 1 Harpie card, special summon 1 Harpie monster from your deck in face-up defense position except Harpie Chandler. You can only use this effect of Harpie Chandler once per turn. While you control a dragon type monster, this card's level becomes 7. This card's name becomes Harpie Lady while it is on the field or in the graveyard. And Harpie Dancer has 1200 attack and 1000 defense, and the effect reads, you can target 1 wind monster you control, return it to the hand, then you can normal summon 1 wind monster. You can only use this effect of Harpie Dancer once per turn. This card's name becomes Harpie Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. So these 3 cards do not follow the rule of 3 simply because of the fact that they are not treated as Harpie Lady while in the deck, only in the field or in the graveyard. So Harpie Queen is actually a pretty good monster simply because it's a 1900 beatstick with a searching effect, and it's also a Harpie Lady while in the field or graveyard, so that's actually not bad at all. We'll get into Harpie Hunting Ground in just a little bit because I'm sure you're curious about that one. Harpie Chandler is a great card, but mainly just because of its first effect, essentially letting you special summon any 1 Harpie monster from your deck in face-up defense position by just discarding 1 Harpie card once per turn. As I have to reiterate, any card that lets you special summon directly from the deck is a fantastic effect. I completely understand that if they actually let you special summon the card in attack mode, or if they let you discard any card as opposed to just a Harpie card, would have probably made the effect a little bit too broken, so they did want to limit that, which I get. But overall, yeah, this is great. Just simply summon it, discard a Harpie, special summon another one, and go into some extra deck plays. The second effect, however, is not so great simply because it's too specific in terms of you having to control a dragon type monster. That may seem random if you're not familiar with the Harpie archetype, but yes, they actually do have some dragons, which I'll get into in just a little bit. But still though, it's not that great of a second effect. And then lastly, Harpie Dancer. This one's a little bit more situational, but it can be a little bit useful as you're simply bouncing a card and summoning another one, kind of like a switching off or tagging off mechanic, which can be pretty useful, but again, not the best thing in the world. Moving on to the next 3 cards, we have Harpie Harpist, Harpie Oracle, and Harpie Perfumer. Harpie Harpist has 1700 attack and 600 defense, and the effect reads, this card's name becomes Harpie Lady while it is on the field or in the graveyard. You can only use each of these effects of Harpie Harpist once per turn. When this card is normal summon, you can target 1 winged beast type monster you control other than this card, and 1 face-up monster opponent controls. Return them to the hand. During the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add 1 level 4 winged beast type monster with 1500 attack or less from your deck to your hand. Harpie Oracle has 1300 attack and 1400 defense, essentially the same stat line as the original Harpie Lady, and the effect says this card's name becomes Harpie Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. You can only use each of these effects of Harpie Oracle once per turn. If you control a level 5 or higher Harpie monster, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add 1 spell or trap from your graveyard to your hand that specifically lists the card Harpie Lady's Sisters in its text during the end phase of this turn. And Harpie Perfumer has 1400 attack and 1300 defense, and the effect says this card's name becomes Harpy while on the field or in the graveyard. If this card is normal or special summon, you can add one spell or trap from your deck to your hand that specifically lists the card Harpy Lady's Sisters in its text. If you controlled a level 5 or higher Harpy monster when you activated this effect, you can also add a second such card with a different name from the first. You can only use this effect of Harpie Perfumer once per turn. So all three are actually pretty useful in some ways. Going back to Harpie Harpies, its first effect is actually pretty noteworthy, simply because if there is a problematic monster you put inside of the field, you can use this, as this effect does actually bypass destruction. So as long as the card is able to be targeted, then it's fine. Its second effect is essentially a search, which is always great, but it is a little bit slow because it does have to be during the end phase, which can be a problem, but regardless, it's not really a bad effect at all. The good thing is that effect doesn't say it has to be specifically sent from the field to the graveyard, just in any way, shape, or form. Harpie Oracle is a bit of a different story here. Its first effect is actually incredibly mediocre, simply because of the fact that it's saying a level 5 or higher Harpie monster. Do you know how many level 5 or higher Harpie monsters there are in the game? The answer is 2. Harpy Lady's Sisters and a certain other one, which we'll get into in just a little bit. More than likely, you won't be running either of these cards in an effective Harpy deck, which makes that effect essentially useless. The second effect is a lot more useful, simply because there are actually a bunch of SpellTrap cards that list specifically Harpy Lady's Sisters in its text. A really neat thing though is that you don't ever have to run a Harpy Lady's Sisters in your deck in order to use the effect. You just need to have cards that actually say Harpy Lady's Sisters. A lot of support cards actually indicate both Harpy Lady or Harpy Lady's Sisters, which is great, which means you can search it. The one downside, of course, is that it does have to be in the end phase of the turn, which can be another problem, and it makes it a little bit slow. Overall, it's not one of the better Harpy cards, but it can be a little bit useful. And Harpie Perfumer, in my opinion, is just a much better version than Harpie Oracle, simply because of its first effect that you essentially get to add the card right away, meaning the spell or trap card that specifically lists Harpy Lady's Sisters in the text. You don't need to wait until the end phase. The second effect, once again, will probably be near useless, as it does also require a level 5 or higher Harpy monster, and it would be nice to add a second card, but unfortunately you're not going to be using it that often. So if you had to pick from these two, I would suggest Harpie Perfumer, as it has 100 more attack and a better searching effect as opposed to Oracle. Moving on to one of their newest lines of support, we have Harpie Conductor. It's a Wing Beast Link 2 monster that says it requires 2 wind monsters. The effect reads, this card's name becomes Harpy Lady while on the field or in the graveyard. You can only use each effect of the following effects of Harpie Conductor once per turn. If a Harpy monster or monsters you control would be destroyed by battle or card effect, you can destroy one spell or trap you control instead. If another face-up Harpy monster you control returns to your hand, except during the damage tab, you can target one special summon monster your opponent controls, return it to the hand. Believe it or not, it's actually not an amazing card, despite it being more of a recent support for the Harpie archetype. It could have been better. Its second effect is a little bit more useful, simply because of the fact that that actually can happen every now and then, whether it's your own effects or your opponent's, and essentially the majority of monsters nowadays are special summon, which means that that effect is going to be popping off quite often. The first effect, although it is nice to have a little bit of protection, whether it's by battle or card effect, it's limited to just that. Plus, it's not the best protection in terms of utilizing resources, because you are getting rid of the spell or trap card you control. There were better options on making this a little bit better, and overall, it's not amazing, but it can be useful as it is an extra deck monster regardless. As I mentioned before, the Harpie archetype is also famous for utilizing some dragon cards. So let's go ahead and go over them. There are 3 of them: Harpie's Pet Dragon, Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon, and Harpie's Pet Phantasmal Dragon. Harpie's Pet Dragon is a wind level 7 dragon monster with 2000 attack and 2500 defense. The effect says, gains 300 attack and defense for each Harpy Lady on the field. While Harpies are pretty good at swarming, and essentially every damn card in the archetype aside from the dragons do actually become Harpy Lady on the field, the effect just simply isn't enough, as all you're going to be getting is a powerful beat stick. It's also a level 7, which doesn't really do the cards any wonders. It's also a level 7, which doesn't exactly do the card any favors, unfortunately, and that can be another issue. This was, however, the second Harpy card that I was talking about that is a level 5 or higher monster. The other one being Harpy Lady's Sisters. Unfortunately, as you can see, they're both not that good. Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon, however, is a level 4 wind dragon monster with 1200 attack and 600 defense. The effect says, this card gains effects based on the number of Harpy monsters you control except Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon. 1 or more. Your opponent cannot target Harpy monsters you control for attacks except Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon. 2 or more, double the original attack and defense of this card. 3 or more, once per turn, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy that target. It's honestly not a good card. You see, its starting attack is 1200. And if you control one or more Harpies, you essentially get battle protection except itself, which is a weak monster at only 1200 attack. Well, that's kinda shitty. With 2 or more, yes, the attack does actually become 2400, which is pretty respectable, but that for just controlling 2, it's honestly not that great of an effect. The third effect, however, is great, but the problem is that you do actually have to control 3 or more, which sometimes can be a little bit of an issue. If this card required just a little bit less for that third effect, it would actually be pretty good, but unfortunately that's not the case. And the third one is Harpie's Pet Phantasmal Dragon. This one is a win, rank 4 Dragon XC's monster with 2000 attack and 2500 defense. It requires 3 level 4 wind monsters, and the effect reads, this card's effects can only be applied/resolved while it has XC's material. This card can attack your opponent directly. Your opponent cannot target any Harpie monsters with effects or for attacks. During each of your end phases, detach 1 XC's material from this card. This is actually not a bad card, especially for the year it came out, back in 2013 or so. 3 level 4 wind monsters is honestly not that difficult to get, simply because of the fact that the majority of Harpie cards are level 4 wind monsters. The fact that it's going to come onto the field with 3 materials means that the protection effects that it has, as well as the attacking directly effect, are actually going to be utilized for a pretty good amount of time, as the card is only requiring you to detach one during each of your end phases and not every end phase. But yeah, a 2000 attacker that can attack directly while also protecting all Harpie monsters, including itself, with effects or for attacks, that's pretty solid actually. So there is one more monster that I do actually want to mention. So we have Sky Scout. It's an 1800 beatstick, normal monster as you can see, but I'm mentioning this because a lot of you who actually grew up with this way back in the day, during the Feral Servant times, you would probably realize that this card used to be called Harpie's brother. However, the Japanese name never actually indicated that this card was Harpie's brother or had any type of Harpie part of its name implemented. The TCG simply incorporated this because I thought it would be great to just kind of put some familiarity here in this archetype back when this wasn't really an archetype. But eventually, as Konami expanded the Harpie archetype, they realized, ooh, we have to actually change this because this card is not a Harpie card. So now it's officially called Sky Scout, and it has been called like that for quite a while. Moving on to some spell and trap card support, we are going to be looking at these 3 at a time, starting with Harpie's Hunting Ground, Triangle Ecstasy Spark, and Cyber Shield. Harpie's Hunting Ground is a field spell card that says all winged beast monsters gain 200 attack and defense. If any Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters is normal or special summon, the player who conducted the summon targets 1 spell or trap on the field. That player destroys that target. It was a pretty good field spell back in the day. Nowadays, the main issue that the archetype has is that they actually don't have an amazing field spell, unfortunately. The archetype definitely could use a much better one, simply because back row removal is nice, but it just needs a little bit more than that beyond also just granting winged beast monsters 200 attack and defense. The other issue with the card is that it actually forces you to destroy spell and trap cards. If your opponent doesn't have any spell or trap cards and you summon a Harpie Lady, you actually have to destroy, you are forced to destroy a spell or trap card on the field. This can be incredibly infuriating simply because of the fact that the card was just poorly worded, as sometimes you will have to destroy a card that you don't want, and if you have no other cards and just itself, you are forced to destroy itself on the summon. Anyway, the next one is Triangle Ecstasy Spark. This one is a normal spell card that says, until the end of this turn, the attack of all Harpie Lady Sisters currently on the field becomes 2700. Your opponent cannot activate any trap cards, also negate all your opponent's trap effects on the field. It was not a good card even back then, and it's also a card that has aged horribly, as the card is only giving you protection from trap cards. If it negated all other cards on the field until the end phase, that would actually be not half bad, as that effect, in addition to buffing up your Harpie Lady Sisters a little bit, actually is a pretty good thing, but sadly, it's just not good. And the last one, Cyber Shield, says equip only to Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters, it gains 500 attack. I really hope that all of you already made a great assumption and judgment on this card and don't need me to talk about this card. I'll just say this, Acts of Despair, a Spell Ruler equip card, is much better than this card. Moving on. The next 3 are Harpie Lady Phoenix Formation, Harpie Lady Elegance, and Alluring Mirror Split. Harpie Lady Phoenix Formation is a normal spell card that says, if you control 3 or more Harpie Lady and or Harpie Lady sisters, target as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, but not more than the total number of Harpie Lady and Harpie Lady sisters you control. Destroy those targets, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack among those destroyed monsters. Your choice of type. You cannot special summon monsters from the main deck or extra deck, nor conduct your battle phase the turn you activate this card. It's actually effectively useful in some ways, as it does let you destroy a bunch of problematic cards that your opponent controls and also inflict a pretty sizable amount of burn damage. The downsides may be a little bit too much of a drawback, but it's actually not horrible because there are a lot of cards that do actually generate so much advantage for you that make you sacrifice your battle phase. Cards like Soul Charge, for example. I'm not saying this card at all compares to that, but I'm just saying, sacrificing your battle phase for essentially wiping out a bunch of cards and doing burn damage can actually be pretty effective. Harpie Lady Elegance is a normal trap card that says shuffle 1 Harpie Lady Sisters from your monster zone into the deck. Then you can special summon 3 Harpie monsters with different original names, 1 each from your hand, deck, and graveyard. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except wind monsters. If this card you control is destroyed by a Harpie card's effect or your opponent's card effect, add 1 Harpie monster from your deck to your hand. You can only use each effect of Harpie Lady Elegance once per turn. It's not a great card, but not horrible. It does require you to actually run a Harpie Lady Sisters in your deck, which sometimes is not the most ideal thing in the world. And you're essentially putting it back into the deck as opposed to the graveyard. That's already kind of a problem. And then special summoning 1 each from your hand, deck, and graveyard means that you do need to have at least 1 in each in order to activate the card. It would have been better if the card only summoned from the deck or from the graveyard even, but the fact that it includes your hand is a little bit of a limitation. It does also have a special summoning limitation except wind monsters. More than likely that's not going to matter in a Harpie deck. And in the last effect, it's nice that you get a little search there, but again, not the most effective search in the world, so it's okay, but it could have been better. And Alluring Mirror Split is a continuous spell card that says, when a Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters you control is destroyed by battle, you can special summon 1 Harpie monster from your deck with a different original name and destroyed monster. If this card you control is destroyed by a Harpie card effect or your opponent's card effect, target 1 Harpie monster in your graveyard, special summon it. You can only use each effect of Alluring Mirror Split once per turn. It's also a little bit underpowered simply because the first effect indicates that it must be destroyed by battle, meaning your Harpie Lady or Harpie Lady Sisters. That's already a huge limitation, and I'm surprised that a card this new actually had that restriction on it, that it's only limited to battle destruction. The second effect is a little bit similar to the previous card, Harpie Lady Elegance, because if it is destroyed, you get an effect. The effect is also not bad, special summoning a Harpie monster in a graveyard is always a good effect, but again, fairly lackluster, and it could have been a little bit more potentially powerful if they just give them a little bit more extra oomph, but unfortunately they didn't. Now we're going to take a look at 2 cards that have a similar name, Hysteric Party and Hysteric Sign. Hysteric Party is a continuous trap card that says activate this card by discarding 1 card, special summon as many copies of Harpie Lady as possible from your graveyard. When this face-up card leaves the field, destroy those monsters. It was pretty good back when it came out, as it is essentially a really effective way to actually swarm, all with only the small cost of 1 discard and then it being a continuous trap card, which doesn't force you to not use it on your first turn, essentially rendering the card a little bit better than cards like Call of the Haunted, specifically for the Harpie archetype. Hysteric Sign, on the other hand, is a continuous spell card that says, when this card is activated, add 1 Elegant Egotist from your deck or graveyard to your hand. During the end phase of the turn this card was sent from the field or hand to the graveyard, add up to 3 Harpie cards with different names from your deck to your hand. You can only activate 1 Hysteric Sign effect per turn and only 1 stat turn. This is a great card for the archetype. The main reason? It's essentially your most powerful searching card. You immediately obtain an Elegant Egotist, which is always great, and then the second effect actually is also incredibly useful. The downside of it being that you cannot activate both effects on the same turn, but that is also why it's offset by the fact that it's a continuous spell card. So if you can make this card survive until the end of the turn you activate it, you are going to be able to activate the other effect regardless of when it's destroyed. And lastly, we're going to look at 3 similar cards known as the Harpie's Feather series. We have Harpie's Feather Duster, Harpie's Feather Rest, and Harpie's Feather Storm. Harpie's Feather Duster is essentially the most broken backrow card ever to be printed. Destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. It's that simple. There's a reason why this card is forbidden, and will probably always stay forbidden because it's just way too damn good. Harpie's Feather Rest is another normal spell card that says, target 3 Harpie Lady and or Harpie Lady Sisters in your graveyard. Shuffle them into the deck and draw 1 card. If you control a level 5 or higher Harpy monster when you activated this effect, draw 2 cards instead. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters except wind monsters. You can only activate 1 Harpy's Feather Rest per turn. Drawing is always nice, which automatically makes the card not dead on arrival, so that's good. Essentially it being an archetype specific Pot of Avarice with a slightly weaker effect and requiring a little bit more to actually draw those 2 cards. Yes, you don't need 5 monsters in the graveyard like Pot of Avarice, only 3 Harpy cards. But if you want to draw that second card, you actually need a Harpie's Pet Dragon or a Harpy Lady's Sisters in your deck. Harpie's Feather Storm is a normal trap card that says if you control a winged beast type monster, until the end of this turn negate any monster effects your opponent activates. If you control a Harpy monster, you can activate this card from your hand. If this card in its owner's spell and trap zone is destroyed by an opponent's card effect, you can add 1 Harpie's Feather Duster from your deck or graveyard to your hand. The last effect is essentially useless because Harpie's Feather Duster is actually banned, but the day it comes unbanned, this is actually going to be a great card to also search for it. Although I should say if and not when. However, the first effect is actually fantastic. Negating opponent's monster's effects is one of the best ways to try and beat over them on your turn, as all you need to do is control a winged beast monster, and until the end of the turn, negate all monster effects your opponent activates. And what's really great is that this card can be activated from the hand if you control a Harpy monster, where if you are actually running a Harpy deck, obviously you're going to be able to activate this from your hand. Yeah, it's a fantastic negate effect, one of the better ones out there for sure, so yeah, definitely run this. And lastly, we're going to move on to 3 related cards to the archetype: Griffin Wing, Phantom Griffin, and Griffin's Feather Duster. You will see soon enough why I have to mention this on this video. So Griffin Wing is a normal trap card that says when your opponent activates Harpie's Feather Duster, negate its effect, and if you do, destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. Phantom Griffin is a wind level 4 winged beast normal monster that has 2000 attack and 0 defense, and its flavor text says a legendary monster that dwells secretly in the mountains, fighting with the Harpies over hunting grounds. A single wing beat is said to cause the fiercest of storms. And lastly, Griffin's Feather Duster is a normal spell card that says destroy all spell and trap cards on your side of the field, increase your life points by the number of destroyed cards times 500 points. So I'll start by talking in terms of gameplay purposes. Griffin Wing is a useless card once again because Harpie's Feather Duster is actually forbidden, and Griffin's Feather Duster is a pretty horrible card as it's making you destroy your own cards and lose cards in exchange for getting a few life points. Yeah, that's horrible. Phantom Griffin in most cases is also not a good card, but I mean it does have at least 2000 attack as a great beat stake, so it's not horrible, it's just not a good card. But now flipping it to talk in terms of lore. So in terms of lore, there's actually a specific reason as to why I have to mention it. First of all, if you take a look at the flavor text of Phantom Griffin, essentially it's implying that there is a rivalry between the Phantom Griffin and a Harpie archetype, meaning the Harpy cards, right? So with that logic, if you try to tie it into Griffin Wing is essentially countering a Harpy card. Essentially, if your opponent activates Harpie's Feather Duster, it's kind of repelling that and fighting off, and it's a really good counter card for that. Once again, in terms of lore, not gameplay. So just for using the flavor text of Phantom Griffin and the effect of Griffin Wing, you can see that the Griffin is in fact a formidable rival of the Harpy cards. The last card, Griffin's Feather Duster, is also a little bit of a reverse effect, as Harpie's Feather Duster destroys your opponent's spell and trap cards. Griffin's Feather Duster destroys your own spell and trap cards as opposed to your opponent's, but you do gain some life points because of that. It's really interesting that they do actually implement a little bit beyond just the Harpy cards with the Harpy archetype. Also, technically speaking, these cards are not a part of the Harpy archetype. They're just related cards and they have really good story and lore wise. But anyway, that is actually it for the entire Harpie archetype. Including the 3 Griffin cards, there's a whopping total of 34 cards in this archetype. I'll actually start by clarifying a couple things and also mentioning some concerns. The very first thing that I kept mentioning throughout the entire video is cards that specifically say if you control a level 5 or higher Harpy card, and I kept saying only Harpy Lady's Sisters or Harpie's Pet Dragon actually count for that. There is actually one notable exception, and this is essentially why they probably want you to run this card a little bit more beyond just those shittier cards that were older, it being Harpie Chandler. If you look at its effect, it says while you control a dragon type monster, this card's level becomes 7. So yes, this card could actually be a level 5 or higher Harpy card, thus enabling you to use those other additional or side effects of certain cards. However, even if you use this card for that, it's not the most consistent thing ever, because you do actually have to control a dragon type monster to make this card level 7. And that is actually much easier said than done, because here's the thing, if you actually run Harpie's Pet Dragon to make this card into a level 7, it's a little bit redundant because you already have a level 5 or higher Harpy card on the field, thus you don't need to use this effect because Harpie's Pet Dragon is already a level 5 or higher monster. You get what I'm saying? If you run Harpie's Pet Baby Dragon, I mean that is a dragon monster, but its effect is a little bit lackluster. Is it really worth it? It could be not. Your best bet is going to be running Harpie's Pet Phantasmal Dragon, as that card actually is pretty good and is not the hardest thing in the world to summon. But one other thing that you could do is also run other dragon monsters, as the effect is not saying, well, you control a Harpy dragon monster. It says any dragon monster, so you could run any unrelated dragon monster to make this card level 7. But overall, that's about it for the archetype. One of my biggest complaints is the fact that their field spell is just simply not that good anymore. They need a better field spell that can utilize Harpy strategies a lot better. In addition, it would have been nice to just give some of the better Harpy cards even more stats. I know they want to stay faithful to the whole 1300, 1400 thing, but there have been some exceptions like Harpie Harpist that has actually had some stronger attack. On top of that, it needs some better extra deck monsters. They have two, Phantasmal Dragon and Conductor. Neither of them are amazing, and they definitely need an amazing extra deck monster. Their support cards have gotten a little bit better over the years, but there are some that are just a little bit too odd and specific, and that's another issue. Overall, it's an archetype that has a lot of potential, but Konami needs to release the right cards at the right time to make some effective use out of this. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one, so as always, if you enjoyed it, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you would like to see more future videos. And as always, I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye everyone, have a great and a fantastic day.